So now we're going to look at when leaders need to bring about a change. And of course, there are all kinds of different kinds of change. We can think about change in a number of different ways. You could first look at the scope of the change. Is it a radical change that you're needing, or is it just an incremental, one-step change? The pace of the change. Is it got a punctuated, clear start and clear end point, or is it some sort of continuous learning, organizational kind of change that's needed? What's the source of the change? Is it something that has come from the top and is coming down, either the board or the executive director or the team leader? Somebody above is saying this needs to happen, or is it something that has come up from the bottom and often then gets turned around and then does become a directive from above? And then there's the process of the change. Is it a change which is carefully planned out? Or is it a change that kind of emerges, maybe through some sort of experimentation? We'll try this for a bit, see if it works. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try something. Oh, that seems to work. Let's do that. Sometimes it's more planned. Sometimes it's more emergent. And different changes will fall in different places on these spectrums. And it's sometimes useful to think about when we're entering into a change. Particularly if it's a significant kind of change and we have to lead that change through, sometimes it's good to really think through what kind of change is this, because different types of change are going to need different approaches as to how we manage them, how we lead through them. One set one process that one can use that's got a set of marked steps in it is called the planning change process. A very exciting name, and it has 6 steps. And the first of those steps is that we should identify and select the problem. Very often when we set out on a project, we have not well understood what the problem is, really. We think we know what we have to do, and we set off on trying to do it. And a well thought out planning process begins by saying, hang on a minute, do we really understand what the problem is before we set out? Which bits of the problem are we going to tackle, or are we going to try and tackle all of it? Secondly then is to analyse, okay, this bit that we are going to focus on, this is the bit that we need to address. Let's really understand that. How did we get to this point? What led us to this? What's the history of it? What options are there? Why is this a problem? Who is this a problem for? Is this a problem at certain times and in certain situations, or in all situations? We have to really analyse the problem. Then we have to generate a number of potential solutions. Very often we come up with a solution and we go, that's brilliant, let's do it. And we do it as quickly as we can. But actually good practice is to try and think through as many possible solutions as you can. Because often the best solution is not the first one you think of. Quite honestly, check this out. You do this. Think of any problem you like. And then start brainstorming and write them down. Idea number 1, idea number 2, idea number 1 is very rarely the best idea. The best idea is somewhere around, about 1/3 of the way through your brainstorm, maybe 2/3 of the way through your brainstorm. So you have to come up with a whole lot of different ideas, which you can then work out, well, okay, which one is the best? Can we select which one are we going to go with, and now make a detailed plan of how we're going to do that? And then seems to be finally is go ahead and implement that solution. But actually finally is then evaluated afterwards and say, how did that go? Could we learn something from this? What would we do differently next time? Is there something that we can learn from this process that will help us to do it differently and better on another occasion. So that's how, you know, we need to sort of work our way through this process, and that can then lead us on to come up with, you know, a whole range of different this can be applied to a whole range of different sort of problems that we need to tackle. One of the classic problems that as leaders we have to challenge is where we believe that a change needs to happen, but it isn't happening. And somehow we have to make it happen. And that can be very difficult. And there's actually a tool that we can use called force field analysis to think about what are the things which are affecting this particular issue. Force field analysis recognizes that for any given issue, there are a number of forces that are pressing against it. Some of those forces may come from yourself. They may come from your personal knowledge, your skill, your determination, maybe even your prejudices. Maybe it comes from other people. What do other people think about this? Maybe these are friends. Maybe these are peers. Maybe these are people who do not like the idea. Maybe they're bosses or subordinates. All sorts of people will be impacting on this thing and keeping it where it is. It may be that the organization itself has got things in place, maybe systems or structures or processes that are keeping this issue how it is. But you know it needs to change. Maybe there are environmental factors, maybe there's social things, maybe there's cultural things, maybe there's domestic issues that keep the issue where it is. Maybe there's tangible resources that are lacking or are pressing on the issue, depending on what it is. Let's take an example, because this is getting a little bit too theoretical. Let's take the example and say, okay, my level of fitness, you know, how fit I am is the issue. And I want to become more fit, but it's not happening because there are a number of forces which are keeping my level of fitness just here, where it is. Some of those forces want to push for me to be more fit, but there are also forces that are pushing against that. Let's work through this example a little bit. So let's say I want to feel better. That's going to be a force that is pushing me towards being more fit. I could also think about, I want to be more productive in all areas of my life, and I will be. If I'm fitter, I'm going to be more productive kind of person. That is pushing towards me being more fit. Equally, I want to play football with my kids, with my friends. That's another thing which I want, and it is pushing towards moving this towards my being more fit. But of course, there are other forces that are at work as well. I think, it's just hard to get started. It's cold. Why would I want to do that? And that's pushing me in this direction. It's saying, no, I don't want to get more fit. There's also the physically, it's hard to get started. Because, you know, the first time you start doing exercises, it's hard work and you don't want to do it. And so it's also a thing which is pushing against the change. And then there's another thought here. Hang on, this is going to take time away from other activities. I'm not going to have as much time as I want for the things which I'm currently doing. And so, you know, there are forces that are pushing for my fitness to increase, but there are also forces pushing against that. And at the moment, it's stuck there, and it's just stuck where it is. Okay, what can I do? Well, I can analyze these different forces, and I can say, well, how powerful are these different things? And okay, I'm not going to try and put a number on any of this, but I can indicate by the size or the color of the arrow. I can say this is a powerful motivator. This one's not so strong. This one's fairly strong. Now that's actually quite a weak argument, really. This is quite a strong argument. You know, And you can weigh up the different arguments that are there for and against the change. And then you can think to yourself, all right, well, I want this thing to move, so what can I do? Can I increase my understanding of these things? What can I do to increase the power of these motivating forces, or these things which are pushing for the change? What can I do to increase them? And similarly, what can I do to decrease the power of these things? And this is not just about personal fitness. This might be an issue that you want to get through a board meeting, and you want to present to the board, here's the great idea that I have. And you can think to yourself, what are the arguments for this case? What are the arguments against? What are the various things that they are going to say about this? Which bits will they like? Which bits will they not like? Put all of those things onto a piece of paper and then look at each one of them and think, okay, how can I increase the things on this side, and how can I decrease the things on this side so that it is more likely that the change will happen? Another aspect of change is thinking about what is called the different phases of change. Because when we are starting out on an issue, we want this change to happen. We want the change to happen, but first of all, there are a bunch of things which have frozen it in its current state. And so maybe we have to first think about, well, how can we unfreeze it before we can make the change? And then, what can we do to refreeze it into that new state once we have completed the change? Another way of thinking about this is like these cart tracks that we see. The tracks that are made when a cart takes the same road every day. It builds up a habit, and so these tracks form. And in those cart tracks, the cart rolls smoothly and normally. That is what it normally does. That is what it is familiar with. That is the way that it goes. If you want to change the way that the cart is going, you have to first get it out of those tracks. So what you have to do is you have to run down the road a little bit, break the tracks up a bit, and then the cart will come up into a new way. But if you don't go the next stage and then refreeze it into its new direction, then there is a significant chance it may just fall back into the tracks that it is most familiar with. We know this. When we make a change, sometimes we have to formalize that change in some way so that people don't just slip back into the old ways of doing it. So if I go back into this one, thinking about these phases of change, it's important that there's some sort of initiating phase where we say, okay, everybody, we need to make this change. And they're saying, we're too busy for change. Well, somehow you have to overcome their busyness. You have to find suitable people, and you have to be able to demonstrate to them that this work is relevant for them. And then you too have to walk the talk. You have to also prove by your actions that this is an important, worthwhile change. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Then as the change takes place, there then needs to be a phase of sustaining the change. It's going to be hard to make change. Most changes are hard work, and you have to overcome natural fear and anxiety. And there's going to be differences. You said it was going to be like this, and it hasn't turned out like that. Almost certainly it's going to happen. What are you going to do? How are you going to bridge that gap between what has been planned and how it's actually turned out? What can you do to encourage the change to happen? And then, following it up, redesigning at the other end, that refreezing stage? What can we do to develop systems or encourage and support local initiatives? You know, the people on the ground who are actually making the change, because it's not just you who have to make the change, but them too. What can you do to encourage and support them, to help them coordinate it, to make sure that it really does succeed, and to do it in such a way that it doesn't damage other things which are going on at their level? You know, we can try and think through these different phases when we are planning a change. And this comes from a chap called Peter Senge, who was a management expert. And not he. There's somebody else who was it? I'm going to go back to my notes. Yeah, of course, Edgar Schein. He said, if you want to change something, it's all about influence. All about influence. What are some of the things that you can do to influence change? He suggested that there were 5 levers, he said. You know, a lever that you could pull that was more likely to see the change happen. And it's going to be about, where do you, as the leader, where do you pay attention? If you focus on the thing and you say, hey, how are we doing on that thing? Other people take notice and it's much more likely to happen. If you have your attention on it, it is more likely to happen. If you say, okay, you've got to do that, now I'm going to go back and do my thing over here, it won't happen. Where do you pay attention? How do you as the leader react in a crisis? Do you go back to the old ways, or do you start using the new thing, whatever it is, the new, it could be the new idea, the new characteristic, the thing that you're wanting to see change. Is it exhibited? Does it come out even in times of crisis, or do you just go back to the old ways? How is it modeled by the leaders? All of the leaders. You know, do the peers, do all the directors, as well as the executive director, do all the directors follow through on this? And do they model it so that other people see it? Are rewards allocated? Now that could be financial. It could be, you know, pay rise, bonus, whatever. It could be a medal. It could just be a, hey, well done. Thank you for doing that. That was really good. That's also a reward. Not all rewards are financial. Most rewards are verbal, coming from your leaders. And also, there can be an element of criteria for selection and dismissal. Do you choose people and do you put people out based on this thing or not? Does this really make a difference to who is on the team? So these things, Edgar Schein said, if you do these things, you are much more likely to see the change come about. In fact, we tend to think that it's about these other 5 things. About how we design our systems and our procedures, how we design our organizational structure, how we physically change the shape of our facilities, the stories, the legends, the myths that we might tell, the formal statements of what we value. And it's true, these things do have value, but the first 5, they are far more powerful in bringing about change. So as leaders, we need to be much more aware of, where do we pay attention? How do we react? How do we model? Where do we say well done? Where do we give praise? Where do we challenge people and say, hey, come on, that's not what we talked about? And when we're selecting people or putting them out of the team, do we go back to this thing that we're trying to change and say, hey, this is really important. I want to see this on the team. Those 5, this is if we go through that, it's much more likely that the change will come about in the way that we were hoping.